They thought I was just a tired old man who didn't understand what was happening. They sat in my living room, in my chairs, drinking coffee from my mugs, and they talked about my future like I wasn't in the room, like I was already gone. Before I tell you how I took back everything they tried to steal from me, please hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Hours, because what my wife left behind changed everything, and I mean everything. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 67 years old. I live in Sudbury, Ontario, and for 41 years I was married to the most quietly extraordinary woman I have ever known. Her name was Dorothy. She was the kind of woman who kept her feelings tucked close, who never raised her voice, who made the best butter tarts in the whole of Northern Ontario and never once asked to be thanked for it. She was not flashy. She did not post pictures on social media. She drove a sensible Civic. She wore the same winter coat for 12 years, and every single Wednesday morning, without fail, she drove herself to a branch of TD Canada Trust on Lorne Street, and she stayed there for at least 45 minutes before coming home. Every Wednesday. For 38 years. I never asked why. That is the part I am most ashamed of. I never asked. I thought it was something to do with her sister. Her sister Paulette lived up in Timmins, and the two of them had a complicated relationship that I learned early in our marriage not to poke at. I assumed the bank had something to do with some arrangement between them, maybe helping her out financially, maybe something else. Dorothy never brought it up, and I never pushed. That was how we worked. 38 years of a good marriage built partly on trust and partly on knowing which doors to leave closed. Then Dorothy died. It was her heart. April 2 years ago. She was 64 years old, and she was hanging laundry on the line in the backyard when she simply sat down in the grass and did not get back up. The paramedic said she likely felt very little. I have tried very hard to believe that. I am not going to describe what those first weeks were like. If you have lost a spouse, you already know. If you haven't, no words I have would prepare you. I will only say that the house became a foreign country. I didn't know where she kept the spare fuses. I didn't know the name of our insurance broker. I didn't know the password to the account she used to pay the utilities. For 38 years, Dorothy had managed the interior architecture of our life together, and I had let her because she was better at it than me, and because I was a fool who thought she would always be there to do it. My son arrived from Calgary 4 days after the funeral. His name is Brandon. He is 41 years old, and he works in commercial real estate. He brought his wife Stephanie with him, and I want to be careful about how I describe Stephanie because I do not want to be unfair. I will say only that. From the moment they walked into my house, Stephanie moved through the rooms with a particular kind of attention that had nothing to do with grief. She opened cupboards. She commented on the size of the lot. She stood in the doorway of Dorothy's sewing room for a long time without saying anything. My daughter Heather came from Toronto 2 days after that. Heather is 38. She is a nurse, which I used to think meant she was a caring person. I understand now that being caring at work and being caring at home are two entirely separate skills that do not always travel together. By the second week after the funeral, both of my children were still in Sudbury. I found this touching at first. I thought they were worried about me. I thought they didn't want to leave their old father alone in a big house in April. I was wrong about that too. It started with small comments. Brandon mentioned over dinner that the house was a lot to maintain for one person. He said it gently. I agreed that yes, it was a large house. He nodded in that way he has, the way that means he's already moved 3 steps ahead in a conversation you haven't realized you're having yet. Stephanie said that there were some lovely new senior living developments going up near Barrie. She said it was incredible what they offered these days. She said the word community 4 times in one sentence. Heather said she had been doing some reading about cognitive decline in men who lose their spouses in their 60s. She said it with the tone of someone delivering medical information, not the tone of a daughter talking to her father. She said she just wanted me to be safe. Safe. I was standing in my own kitchen, in my own house, where I had lived for 31 years, and my children were suggesting with great gentleness that perhaps I should not be living there anymore. I didn't fight them that night. I was still too tired from grief to fight anyone about anything. I said I would think about it. I went to bed and I lay there in the dark, and I thought about Dorothy, and I thought about what she would have said if she'd been there. She would have said, "Go to the bank, Jeff." Her exact words. I heard them as clearly as if she were lying next to me. I didn't know what that meant yet. But the next morning I went looking. I found the key on the third day of searching, which tells you something about how thoroughly I did not know my own house. It was not hidden dramatically. It was not taped under a drawer or buried in a coffee tin. It was in the inside pocket of an old winter coat in the back of Dorothy's closet, a red wool coat she had worn in the 1990s and kept for reasons I never knew. The coat smelled like her perfume. I stood in that closet for a long time. The key was small, brass, with a number stamped on the side. No logo, no label, just a number, 447. I had no idea what it opened. I almost set it aside. I almost put it in the dish on the dresser where we kept spare change and batteries and the little odds and ends that accumulate in a long life together. But something stopped me. I turned it over in my fingers. I thought about those Wednesday mornings, 45 minutes every week, 38 years. What had she been doing in there? I called TD Canada Trust the next morning. Not the branch on Lorne Street. I didn't want to go in without knowing more. I called the general line and I asked whether they had safety deposit boxes. They did. I asked whether a box might be rented in a spouse's name with access granted to a second party. The woman on the phone was patient and kind and told me I would need to come in with identification and proof of my wife's passing. She said it in a gentle voice, the way people do when they understand what the word passing contains. I told Brandon and Heather I was going out to run some errands. Stephanie offered to come with me. I said no thank you. I said it pleasantly. I drove myself to the branch on Lorne Street and I walked in and I asked to speak with someone about a safety deposit box. The branch manager's name was a young woman, early 30s, kind eyes, professional. She reviewed Dorothy's death certificate. She looked at my identification. She verified the access list on the account, and she went quiet for a moment in a way that told me there was something there. She excused herself. She came back with a senior colleague. They spoke quietly between themselves. Then the manager turned to me and said that my wife had indeed maintained a safety deposit box at this branch and had listed me as the authorized second party, but that there was also a file they had been instructed to hold for me personally to be opened only in the event of Dorothy's death. My hands were not entirely steady when she said that. She walked me to a private room. She set a sealed envelope on the table. She set the box beside it. She said she would give me as much time as I needed and she left me alone. The envelope first. Dorothy's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in weeks and it hit me somewhere behind the sternum. She had beautiful handwriting always. Neat, slanted slightly to the right. Jeffrey, it began. Not Jeff, Jeffrey. She only used my full name when she was being serious. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And you have done what I always knew you would do. You came looking. That is one of the reasons I loved you. You are not as incurious as you pretend. I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you before you open that box, because the money matters less than the reason. I grew up watching my mother disappear, not in a dramatic way, just in the way women do when no one protects what is theirs. I decided when I was 19 years old that I would never let that happen to me. And then I fell in love with you, and I decided I would never let it happen to you either. Every Wednesday I came to this bank. I set aside what I could. $20 some weeks, $100 in better ones. I invested it through a financial advisor here named Mr. Arsenault. He knows who you are. He is expecting your call. I kept it separate from our joint accounts, not to hide it from you, but to protect it from anything that might come. Medical emergencies, lawsuits, bad luck, the things you cannot predict. I also made decisions about our house and our estate that you need to know about. Everything is in the box. Our lawyer is Sylvia Nkosi at Nkosi and Pemberton on Elm Street. She also knows who you are, and she is also waiting for your call. Please do not let the children make your decisions for you. You are not frail. You are not diminished. You are the man I chose, and you are more than capable of this. I love you. I always did, even when you left your tools on the kitchen counter, Ori. I sat in that room for a while before I opened the box. What was inside would take me several more days to fully understand with the help of Sylvia Nkosi and Mr. Arsenault. But the overview was this. Dorothy had, over 38 years of careful, consistent, private effort, accumulated just over $420,000 in a registered investment account in her name. She had updated the beneficiary designation 18 months before she died, when she must have known something was wrong with her heart, so that the full amount transferred directly to me outside of the estate. Meaning it did not go through probate, meaning it was mine the moment she died, meaning no one could contest it. The house was different. Dorothy had restructured the ownership of the house 12 years earlier, during a refinance I had vaguely known about and paid no real attention to. She had placed it in a family trust, with me as the sole trustee and life beneficiary. Our children were remainder beneficiaries, meaning they would receive the property after my death, but they had no claim to it, no access to it, and no authority over any decision about it while I was alive. I want you to think about that. My daughter and my son-in-law had spent 2 weeks in my house, sleeping in my guest room, eating my food, and suggesting in their gentle way that perhaps I should consider a move to a senior living development near Barrie, and they had no legal right to so much as rearrange the furniture without my permission. I did not call Sylvia Nkosi that day. I drove home, and I made myself a sandwich, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I thought about my wife, my quiet, sensible, civic driving wife, who kept her feelings close and made butter tarts and never once asked to be thanked. And I understood for the first time what she had actually been doing all those years. She had been building a fortress, brick by brick, $20 at a time, every Wednesday morning for 38 years. And she had built it around me. That evening at dinner, Brandon brought it up again. He had printed something out, an actual printout, which told me Stephanie had been involved. It was information about a retirement residence in Barrie with a vibrant social calendar and a chef-prepared dining experience. He set it on the table beside my plate. He said he and Heather had been talking. He said they were worried about the winter, about the driveway, about what would happen if I fell. He said it all in his real estate voice, the one that makes everything sound reasonable, the one that closes deals. I looked at the printout. I looked at my son. I looked at Heather, who was watching me with that clinical expression she'd been wearing all week. I said, I appreciate the concern. I said, I want you both to know that I've had a productive few days and I've been in touch with your mother's lawyer and her financial advisor. I said, I'm going to need you to understand that this house is held in a family trust in which I am the sole trustee, and I have no intention of leaving it. Brandon said, What? I said, Your mother set it up 12 years ago. Sylvia Nkosi and Pemberton can walk you through the details if you'd like. I'd suggest calling ahead to make an appointment. Stephanie said, I don't think that's right, I said. You're welcome to verify it. That's what lawyers are for, Heather said, in a smaller voice than the one she'd been using all week. Dad, we were just trying to help. And I looked at my daughter who I had held as a newborn in a hospital in Sudbury in 1986, who I had taught to ride a bike on the crescent behind our house, who I had driven to the airport for every adventure of her adult life, and I said, I know, and I believe you believe that. But your mother spent 38 years making sure I would be okay without her, and I think the least I can do is trust her. Nobody said much after that. They left 3 days later. Brandon gave me a hug at the door that was slightly stiffer than usual. Heather cried a little, which I think was genuine. Stephanie said the drive to the airport wasn't too bad if they left before noon, which was not directed at me, but which I heard clearly. I stood in the driveway and I watched the rental car until I couldn't see it anymore. Then I went inside. I made tea. I sat in the kitchen in the same chair I've sat in for 31 years, and I looked out the window at the backyard, where Dorothy's garden was already starting to come back from the winter. She had planted a row of peonies along the fence 12 years ago that came back every spring without anyone having to do anything at all. They didn't need to be managed or guided or moved somewhere more suitable. They just needed to be left to do what they already knew how to do. I called Mr. Arsenault the following week. He was a patient man in his late 50s who had clearly respected my wife enormously and showed it in the way he spoke about the decisions she had made over the decades. He walked me through the investment account in detail. He talked about what a conservative, consistent, long horizon strategy looked like over 38 years, and the number he showed me was real. It was more real than the printout about the retirement residence in Barrie. He said Dorothy had given him one specific instruction written down to give to me if he ever met me. He read it to me over the phone. She had written, "Tell him to fix the back step. He knows which one." I laughed. For the first time since April, I actually laughed. There is a step on the back deck that has been slightly uneven since 2019, and Dorothy had been asking me to fix it for 5 years, and I kept saying I would get to it, and I never did. I fixed it the next Saturday. It took me 40 minutes. It was the most useful I had felt in months. I have not sold this house. I have not moved to Barrie. I have not enrolled in a vibrant social calendar or a chef-prepared dining experience. I had the driveway sealed in August, and I hired a young man from down the street to help with the heavier snow clearing this winter, which is not defeat. That is called delegation, and Dorothy would have approved. My son and I have spoken several times since the spring. The conversations are careful, the way conversations are when trust has been bent but not quite broken. I believe we will find our way back to something better. He is not a bad man. He was under the influence of a particular kind of anxiety that makes people do things they would not otherwise do, and I understand that anxiety because I felt it too. The feeling that time is shorter than it used to be, that things need to be settled, that someone should be in charge of what happens next, but I am in charge of what happens next. Dorothy made sure of that. What she did in that bank every Wednesday for 38 years was not secretive. It was not deceptive. It was the patient, unglamorous work of a woman who understood something I had not fully understood, that love is not only what you feel, it is what you build. Quietly, consistently, $20 at a time, in a branch on Lawrence Street, in a city in northern Ontario, in a life that did not look remarkable from the outside, but was, in every way that matters, extraordinary. I still keep her letter in the inside pocket of her red coat. I take it out sometimes when I need to hear her voice. Fix the back step. He knows which one. I did, and I am still here.